Hello, Ivor.
Hey, Scott. What's
Here
up?
we're into June now. It's June. The weather finally turned a corner, eh?
Well,
It's all right.
after my weekend in Montreal last weekend, I was up at the F1 and
Oh, yeah.
man, oh man, it was like being at an Argo game in November at the F1. It was like it was windy, it was cold, it was a little bit of rain, and I'm like, oh my God! So I had like a t-shirt, my hoodie, a raincoat on, and yeah, I was okay, but like fortunately, we had one of the most exciting races of the F1 season to see, so that kind of took the cold away. But it was not that comfortable, that's for sure. But what an
Wow.
experience in Montreal was absolutely hopping. The night before, there was the Habs were playing the night before, not in Montreal, but there was just like hundreds of thousands of jerseys all over the city and people celebrating the Montreal Canadiens. And we went to a bar to watch the game, and I sat through all of it in French, but it was still a great experience. People in Montreal were very good to us, and some
Yeah.
incredible cars on the street too, Scott. Oh my God,
Oh,
like
yeah.
just the cars, the Ferraris and Lamborghinis and the high end cars from all over were
Yeah.
in full force in that city. And you could get yourself a F1 commemorative T-shirt, the bottom line one, at the race for only $95. That was and a nice cap for 120.
And
So on
that's
the
why you're
way,
not wearing any of that
I
today.
don't have it. Any of it. So I
Yeah.
opted not to spend on that. I decided to get myself a good corned beef sandwich at a place called Franklin's that I thought was great. So
Nice. Okay. Even though the weather's better, it's still cool at night. That's why Ivor and I still have hoodies on here as we tape in the morning this morning. But
yes, and the AC's on too. So
well, that's true. That is true. That is true. Okay, there's a whole bunch of stuff to cover this week. We're looking at the first week of June, June 1st to the 7th. So milestones and music and concert memories from that week. We got some updates. First of all, the CFNY documentary tour, the theater tour, is coming to an end. Uh,
yes,
Buffalo was postponed. Maybe you want to talk about that. And of course, the final Brampton showing, which is this Friday, the 6th of
yes.
June.
No, it's the Saturday, Scott, the 6th.
Oh, Saturday. Sorry, thank
Saturday
you.
the
It is
6th.
Saturday.
Let's get that. Let's get that cleared up. First
See,
of
this is
all,
in retirement, Ivor. We don't know what day of the
no,
week
I
is,
know.
right?
Just for you people who are considering retired, from my cousin Andy Mills, who listens in from Victoria, his phrase to me when I retired is he goes, "You have 6 Saturdays and football on Sundays," and he's not wrong. And so that's why we forget. That's how
I love it.
we follow things.
I love it.
So for Buffalo, our sincere apologies on the postponement. A couple of factors have weighed in onto this. First of all, a CFNY band from the '90s was in town the same night. Cake took a lot of tickets out of the market, and but mainly we have a new partnership with PBS, and we've talked a little bit about that in the past, but that's finally come to fruition. So we're working with them to find a date to reschedule so we can do it and do it up even bigger than we had hoped to do originally. And I'm very excited about this because it will be screened at minimum throughout New York State, but I am told that it is a very, very good chance that it will be screened in a much larger footprint across the U.S. And that's got Scott and Ivor and Alan sitting there thinking about, well, let's see if we can open up a U.S. store for our merch because, the way the Trump administration works these days, it's become very, very prohibitive for us and most merch companies to send things to the United States. So we're hoping to open a door up so we are able to do that. And of course, we had a whole bunch of merch pressed up for the Buffalo event that we still have. So we'd like to make it available to you, our followers. And again, our apologies on that. You would have received if you bought a ticket, you would have got an email by now from the town ballroom. You have the option to get a refund or hang on to your tickets and wait for an updated announcement on next steps on that. Now, this coming Saturday, there still are good tickets available for our event at the Cyril Clark Theater. It is a doors at 7 p.m. start. Tickets at tickets.brampton.ca. Just key in CFNY and it will take you directly to the ticket page. We will have our merch there and those damn shirts in medium, Scott. I am making sure that we have plenty of those because that seems to be the bane of our existence, that you guys don't have mediums. A commemorative poster to all in attendance. And, we have all of our, this is basically your last chance to see the Spirit of Radio team all together. Well, until the next time, but let these reunions go that they
until the
retire
book
for a while, until the book. So for another year and a half for the book, but myself, you, Alan, Liz, David Marston, Fred Patterson in attendance. Also,
a pretty good crew.
Humble Howard, Maureen Bully, who was the head of our copywriting team and production, and this is new. Walter Van Afro. Now he's a name that you probably maybe wouldn't remember. He was kind of a little bit more post Spirit of Radio days, but he was there working on the road show. But if you're a listener to Jazz FM, he is probably one of that radio station's most prolific DJs in Toronto, if not throughout the country.
His show is great on the weekends.
His show is amazing.
It is.
He takes a lot of chances, and I'm thrilled that he's going to be joining us in Brampton. And of course, if you ever went to Calypso Garden in Brampton as well, Jai, who ran the restaurant, is going to be joining us on that night too, which I'm really looking forward to. And damn it, Scott, I'm going to find time to go to Calypso Garden either before or after. We'll see what we can.
I think we should do that. I want to mention too, Liz Janik, who's on the Q&A. We did a Liz Janik interview, a Music Milestones YYZ Liz Janik interview. It's a fantastic episode. It's also out currently this week, so look for that where you get your podcasts. And she was great. Lots of stories we forgot, and other anecdotes about CFNY. Lots of CFNY stuff.
Yeah, and Liz's career post CFNY, I mean, she was a real trailblazer as far as being a radio consultant in Canada and the U.S., and we discuss the people that she worked with Gary Slate. She worked with Dave Charles and John Pericol, which were, these joint communications programmers, and I had to laugh because those guys, were the anti-CFNY, like they just sort of programmed the way, and we would never done it at CFNY. And then I find out as soon as those guys finished work and went home, they listened to CFNY. So I think they liked us for the music, not so much for the way we ran the radio station, but that's all good. So we have a lot of great things to talk about in that.
Okay.
Scott, you want to mention we've got some mail this week, right?
Oh, yeah, actually, yeah. So look at that. And we have a website. Sometimes Ivor and I forget some of the different things we have with our podcast here, but there's a website that you can actually message us through the website. Do you want to give that out?
Yeah, Music Milestones YYZ, because I heard Getty say that last week, and I'm like, shit. We're kind of doing it for the Americans because that sounds cooler. And there's Geddy Lee on an American interview with Rick Beato saying, YYZ. And I was like, right. Okay. So Music Milestones, YYZ.com, and you can leave your comments on there. All of our episodes are on there as well.
Sure. And we will answer them. Because we don't get many emails, I thought we'd just read this one here from Mike Wickham. Thank you, Mike. He says, I discovered your podcast, episode number 25. I've listened to about 6 so far. Good man. Great work. Lots of info, behind-the-scenes stories. You brought back some wonderful memories. Ivor mentioned about having a CFNY or having the CFNY station IDs. The one I remember, and I would like to hear again, is the Sizzling Summer Saturday promo. Please play the standard CFNY Spirit of Radio promo. I'd love to have a digital copy of both of these if possible. Thanks. Blah, blah, blah. So thank you to Mike Wickham. We'll try to find that and play that. And another one that came up was the mosquito repellent promo where there was a special, signal that went out over 102.1 to kill the mosquitoes, which was not true, but it had everybody fooled, especially when it won an award in New York. We'll play that in the next couple of weeks because it's the anniversary of when the station won that award and this award ceremony, this award presentation was around the world as radio stations from around the world submit, and CFNY won it for this promo.
And if you missed our podcast last week, we talked about the today's snake oil scam that's out there in the market, that there is a little device that is being promoted right now that sends out electronic waves to get roaches and ants out of your house as well.
Yeah, whatever.
Looked up on
Okay,
that one. Total scam. Do not
you're
buy
right.
this item. So
Also,
anyway,
we have
those.
a yes, we have a correction from last week. Do people do message us on our socials, which is fine, and we'll try to address them
Yeah,
on the show when we can.
I mean, the good thing about this, I am hearing quite constantly from former staff members at CFNY, and this is no exception. This past week, Earl Jive, he checked in and he goes, "Ivor, you made a mistake you talked about Tim Keel." So I looked up Tim Keel's shows. And so this was something that he posted back in 2010 on the spiritofradio.ca website. And we're going to try and get Tim on a future episode. He goes, "I was at the station from 1980 to 1982. I produced and hosted Who's Who was the name of the program, a regular interview show with both local bands and those tours that brought them to Toronto. And there were over 500 that he had during that time frame. I produced and anchored the daily news feature, Who's Where." And I think that's where I got the mistake wrong between Who's Where and Who's Who. Scott, all I can say is who knew? Anyway,
Who's on first?
I hosted a regular shift Sunday afternoons and was the swing shift guy when people were away on holiday. So,
Right.
And Tim just did a great interview for our book. And, not only do we want to have Tim on the program, that I've been talking to Earl about him coming on the program, but I said, if you come on, you got to bring Beverly on, or as we fondly called her, the Beeve. So he goes, "I'm working with the Beeve. The Beeve's a little harder to track down to get to hook it up." So I'm hoping that we can do it next week, but do stay tuned. We're going to try and do it in the near future.
Okay, good stuff. Okay, do you want to get to some concerts? We have a few new concert
Yeah.
announcements.
One of the things you and I, Scott, been talking about in numerous episodes have just been, how price of tickets have skyrocketed, even though there's a legislation in there that is helping the cause and leveling the play field a little bit. But, a former intern of mine was up at the F1 this past week, and we were trying to hook up, and she said, "Yeah, me and my girlfriends are here. This is our third year, but we probably won't come back because it's just become so unaffordable." So this morning I'm putting the show together, and the New Musical Express just put out this posting. The All American Rejects, if you remember that band, they were around in the early 2000s. They've hit out at the soaring ticket pricing, saying that the cost of tickets makes seeing live music, as in their quotes, a District 1 Hunger Games luxury. So last year, to combat that, they embarked on a tour that included stops at house parties, a bowling alley, a barn, and they did it all in an attempt to create, more financially live music experience. Frontman Tyson Ritter explained in a recent interview, "We're self-funded, we're self-produced. It's turned into something we didn't expect. This realization that people need intimacy again. People have tired of having their bank accounts run dry." Their guitarist Nick Wheeler questioned, "How has it become less expensive to go overseas to see your favorite band than just see them in your own city?" And that we're at the point in this conversation where the responsibility, especially in the headliner, falls on the artist. It's become a one percenters experience, and I think that's fucked up, because the people who love the music the most, the people who need the music the most, are the people that are hand to mouth, the people that come from where we're from. So to me, these guys make a lot of sense on that. So, I mean, I think that's where, a lot of people start playing bowling alleys, playing, little pubs, and probably starting out by playing in people's basements. So this is a band that had a major label contract with Interscope Records. They're back to the basics now, doing that to survive. So that's unfortunate.
And he doesn't get into detail there, but part of that issue, I love that about these people that, for Taylor Swift, would go over to Europe and see it cheaper, even though it was still more crazy money. But the other part is that Live Nation has bought up some of the mom and pop independent venues, right?
They bought the Key to Bala as one example.
There
right?
You go.
That's all Live Nation. They have swept up so many venues, and it's not just in Canada and the U.S. It's all across Europe
yes.
too, right? So it's pretty much everywhere. I mean, I know, lots of people at Live Nation. I got friends over there, but at the same time, it really has taken the competition out of the market in a big way, and we continue to have these ridiculously high prices. So
yeah. Anyway,
okay,
other shows.
Yeah, so Hillside Festival in Guelph, which has gone on forever and ever, takes place between the 17th and 19th of July. 3 days of music, plus extensive activities and workshops. You want to find out more about this, hillsidefestival.ca/schedule, and there's an app for more updates. They won't ask you to sign up for a subscription. There's 4 stages, but just here's a couple of the highlights on each night. The Friday, Mae Martin, Colorado, and the Darcys. Saturday, Donovan Woods and Stars. Sunday, Matt Mays and Cowboy Junkies. It's a great festival.
Yeah.
Very stable. I love the fact they've got all these extra workshops and things going on along that as well. Now, September the 11th, this is kind of an odd bill, but this is at the RBC Amphitheater. Roxette, Taylor Dane with Nick Lowe and Lost Straitjackets. That's the one that throws me a curveball on that one. Nick Lowe
and Taylor Dane in the same bill. Yeah.
Okay. Just like whatever. And here's one that I could be wrong on this, but it seems to me like it's a long time. Pat Metheny.
Wow.
His band is called Side Eye now. October 9th at Massey Hall. Death from Above. Yeah, I mean that could be.
You're right. I when's the last time Pat Metheny played?
I can't remember.
He's played many times in Toronto, but it feels like a long time.
Yeah, it's probably a jazz festival, Toronto Jazz Festival, whatever. So that's going to be at History on November 12th. Pat Metheny at October 9th, and finally Death from Above, 1979, November 27th at History. I did want to mention on top of that some key records that are out this week, including Paul McCartney's The Boys of Dungeon Lane. It's a pretty good record. I don't know if you've had a chance to check any of it out, Scott, but worth taking, an hour or so to sit down and listen to. There's also a duet on there with Ringo, but the band's playing really well. I think the record's pretty good. I
was going to say just quickly, Ivor, was the Stephen Colbert when they did Hello Goodbye with Paul McCartney at that last episode was great. If you haven't seen that, I'm sure it's on YouTube.
Yeah, and of course he was on SNL recently too.
Yeah.
The other one, I played this on my show, both on the Bridge, which, by the way, my show on the Bridge in Buffalo is going on hiatus for the summer. This Sunday is the last one, and then they're doing some changes and on their schedule. They're doing a bunch of different things there. So we're going to be on hiatus, as all of the shows on the Bridge are on hiatus till August or early September. Synth supergroup called Double Speak. Self-titled album is just out now today. Vince Clarke from Yazoo, Depeche Mode, Neil Arthur from Blamage, and super producer Bengay. And so it's a great record. It's a good combination of synth classics, a couple of originals, and then some sort of classics from the 70s that are reinterpreted, synth-wise and made a little bit modern. For example, there's David Essex's Rock On as one, and a Glenn Campbell as another. And then finally, a couple of other ones to mention. This was out last week, but I love this record so much. Ed O'Brien from Radiohead, his new record is called Blue Morpho. This is just, it's always, they shine the spotlight on Tom York and one of the other guys in the band, but this Ed O'Brien record is absolutely fantastic, called Blue Morpho. And for you fans, last week we talked about the Beautiful South and the House Martins. Paul Heaton, his new solo record is coming out August 21st. It's called Genius, spelt with a J. Ha ha ha. And the first single on that is out now, called Favorite Kind of Idiot. All of these records that I've just mentioned we'll put on our playlist for this week as well.
Okay, that's good. Thank you, Ivor. Excellent.
No
okay, well, unless you had anything else there, we'll dig into some milestones.
Let's do it.
Okay. All right, the 2000s. We're going to start with the 2000s this week. We're looking at the week of June 1st to the 7th. And if we go back 25 years, June 5th, 2001, the Pleasure and the Greed album from Big Wreck was released.
Yeah, that was one that caused the band to break up, to be honest. Big Wreck have broken up and got back together, but it did not have a lot of commercial success in the US, which is one of the things that they were shooting for. But it ultimately, at the end, it was signaled the end of the first chapter for Big Wreck, and it's looked upon much more favorably today than it was back when it first came out.
They are actually, off and on again, but they're on again now for sure. They are touring. The dates I have here are the Bentway on June 12th and July 11th in Hamilton at Pier 4 Park. Big Wreck, not like I need to go back and listen to the full albums in that, but when I was working in Kitchener radio, we played that song and The Oaf and just great tracks. I just thought,
they're you kind of put Big Wreck out there and Big Sugar and Our Lady Peace and Headstones,
Tea Party. I like
Tea Party.
Yeah.
All of those bands, Matthew Good and his band now. I mean, they're all sort of on that sort of similar wavelength, similar level, with each having their peaks and valleys of successes, but they're good. They're good Canadian staple rock bands, and always worth giving them a little bit of support.
Okay. Now, this is not a album or single, but it is a movie that was very on the musical side, which was Moulin Rouge, which was basically a musical, the Baz Luhrmann production. And did you ever see the film or the theater production or the soundtrack?
I saw the film, and I obviously at the time heard all of the music that was released from it and the videos and what have you. And at the time you just kind of went, holy shit. Like it was so massive. Like you just think back to that time and go, it was massively significant.
Oh, it was.
It kind of brought, because musicals had kind of fallen out of favor. There wasn't, what were the big musicals 5 or 10 years before that? I mean, you always said, Phantom of the Opera and Mamma Mia or whatever, but Moulin Rouge just seemed to be something that was a little more sexy and a little more different than those other ones. Cause Mamma Mia and Phantom of the Opera were like, yeah, those are like, I took my mom to see both, but my mom didn't want to go see Moulin Rouge. That's kind of like, that's a date one. All the girls are going to go out to see.
But it was different too, right? It was the way it was interpreted, this basically modern music. And then you kind of brought it into a cabaret style. So there's the Moulin Rouge sort of, look and feel. And then you got all this modern music tied in, and it could have been a disaster, but the way it was done was brilliant. Right. And then just
absolutely
visually, because I remember getting it on Blu-ray and because seeing it on the big screen too, like just the colors, the set designs, everything they did with the film was it just kind of came off the screen and was just like wow, right?
Yeah.
Let me play a little audio clip to set the scene for those that maybe have forgotten the film from 25 years ago.
A life without love, that's terrible.
No, being on the street, that's terrible.
No, love is like oxygen.
What?
Love is a many splendid thing. Love lifts us up where we belong. All you need is love.
Please don't start that again.
All you need is love.
A girl has got to eat.
All you need is love.
She'll end up on the street.
All you need is love.
Love is just a game.
Oh, should we have a $10 bet on if we're going to get busted this week on that?
Just because, they're not famous lyrics at all. No, not at all. Nicole Kidman there, of course, with Ewan McGregor, and she apparently in the rehearsals had broken a couple of ribs or bruised some ribs, and so some of the scenes they shot sort of, from just the neck up, or for the chest up, so you didn't see that. She was kind of hurting or sort of favoring her ribs.
Their rendition of Lady Marmalade in that film too. Jesus, that was just such a great party track with Christina Aguilera, Pink, and Little Kim. Maya on that one was like really, really spectacular.
It was a lot of fun. It was really good. Okay, let's move into. We're still into the 2000s. 2011. June 6th was the release of "Suck It and See," the Arctic Monkeys. That was the album number 4.
Yeah, I mean, my memories of Arctic Monkeys at that time is that they were so hot. And that record came in at number one in the UK, but um, there was some big controversy, as there is in America about, with uh, retailers like Target and Walmart at the time, because the album was called Suck It and See, and which is sort of a British slang for like, well, just see, take it and see it, or whatever.
Yeah, in 2011, people are having an issue with that. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, so they did, like Walmart and Target, they had to put all like big giant stickers over the album cover, so you didn't see that title. But it ended up being a blessing in disguise for the band, because because it just generated a lot of publicity over that.
True.
So
that works.
Sort of like the free marketing for the Arctic Monkeys at the time. Anyway, there you have it, Alex Turner and Company.
Okay. Also, here's one. 25 years ago, 2001, June 5th, the very first Coldplay show in Toronto at the Warehouse. They were rescheduled from February because the bassist had a really bad case of the flu, so a number of the shows were pushed back. And Ivor, you were there, so this is the very first Coldplay show.
Yes, I was there, and I was, Coldplay were on EMI, and of course I was at Universal Music, but I was very interested in the early. I really liked the early stuff, but I kind of, personally, after that, I kind of lost my interest in it, but whatever. They're still a great band. I really wanted to go, and even them at the Warehouse at that point was the hottest ticket in town.
Yeah, sold out. Yeah,
it totally sold out. But the Garys actually did that show, and yeah. So I called Gary Cormier and said, Gary, like, can I buy a ticket? Is there any way that, I don't mind paying for a ticket or whatever. Can I get in? And he goes, I can't. There's nothing left to be had. He goes, but I got an idea. He goes, do you mind working for me for an hour? And I'm like, huh? He goes, take tickets at the door for an hour. And I'm like, okay. And then he goes, I'll just walk you in. Right. So of course I did it. And of course, nobody knows anybody in the Toronto music business. Not so.
Ivor, what are you doing?
There's
at the door?
About 50 people came through the door going, what the fuck is Ivor Hamilton doing taking tickets at a Coldplay show, right? And but that was I did it for an hour, and he just says, go in and see the show, have a good time. And that's how I ended up getting in. But it was the one time that I took tickets at a show.
Yeah, I remember that story. That's a good one.
I was working cheap, man.
Yes. Okay, let's do the 90s. All right, we're looking at 1996, so 30 years ago. Who Will Save Your Soul this week? Jewel single comes out, big record.
Well, it wasn't a big record at first. That is what I've sort of done a deep dive on this this particular.
Took a while. That does happen, yeah.
It took forever, and when the record came out, it was a stiff. I think it sold about 12,000 copies, and it just wasn't doing anything. It was actually also the first song that she ever wrote, and she wrote it on a road trip when she was hitchhiking. As you probably recall that she did a lot of hitchhiking on her own. So it was, I think, somewhere between the South and going across to Tijuana, Mexico. Anyway, well, more than that. So it says, perform the lyrics while riding in a train and hitchhiking between Michigan, San Diego, and Tijuana, Mexico. Anyway, the album was released in February of 95, so it took all of this time to have that breakthrough. Well, you and I also talked about management at the time, too, on a previous episode. She was managed by her mom. Anyway, so radio stations started picking up on this, and the album went from being a stiff to being 12 times platinum in the U.S. alone. Went on to sell 12 million units at that time, and completely, changed everything for her. And to think that was the very first song that she ever wrote, to have that success, and probably the only thing she would ever need in life now, off all the royalties off of that song would just keep her in money forever.
Not that being managed by your mom is a bad idea. And I was not trying to say that. You know, it's funny. I remember
No.
when I was working in radio in Kitchener at 91.5 The Beat, Justin Bieber was brought around, you know, in his early days. And his mother's always there. And his mother's basically sort of managing his affairs. And then he goes on the air because there's a bunch of fans that had gathered outside the radio station. And through the window, he's waving at them. Then he goes on the air saying, because he sees a McDonald's in the parking lot. And he says, "Oh, I would love a Big Mac." And sure enough, all these girls go running across the parking lot. They're all grabbing Big Macs. And somehow it gets up into the studio. And mom's, you know, across the microphones in the studio going, "You're not eating that. You are not having that."
Yeah, we called them at the labels, we called them mummagers. You know, so who's the manager? a mummager and a dadager. And I'm like, yeah, that's you know, because you would be, when you get these big acts, you're used to working with them on a certain level of professionalism, and then you get a mummager in there, and you're like, oh my God, right? Like, so clearly there was a lot of people who are, you know, well over their heads, and even Shania Twain, when we first started working with her first manager was a woman named Mary. I can't remember her last name. Nice enough. She wasn't a mummager or a dadager, but it was like, I think, you know, she might have managed her casino appearances up north and some, you know, shitty bars up in Sault Ste. Marie or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, all of a sudden she's, you know, nominated for Grammys and doing major stadium tours across the world. And that doesn't really cut it after that, you know.
Yeah,
so.
it's time to hand the reins over to somebody else.
Yeah. So
Mummager, I love it. Mummager, dadager. I love it. Okay, so the Load album from Metallica released 30 years ago this week.
Yeah, I mean, that was you know, a lot of people sort of Metallica fans diss that record, but that was when they sort of conscientiously, you know, in certain bands, you're kind of like going, okay, we can only be a death metal band with death metal imaging for so long. And that was like the first album where they sort of like, you know, changed up the production. We got haircuts. We started styling a little bit and changed the style from sort of more death metal to being a heavy rock band. And it was groundbreaking for them because that sort of took them, you know, they were an arena band, but it kind of went from arena to stadiums after that. And they never looked back after that. So to me, despite the fact that a lot of the diehards didn't like it, brought them a whole new generation of fans.
Okay, in the 90s, we're going to go back to 1991, so 35 years ago this week. So Something to Talk About, the single from Bonnie Raitt, was released and written by a Canadian, Shirley Eichhardt. So got lots of Canadian radio play because of the CanCon rules, but actually good little track. You know, something very commercial for more mainstream for Bonnie Raitt, who I'd seen live. It has got such a bluesy background and who's fantastic live, right? If you've seen Bonnie Raitt live, is a great show any time of the week. I would go see Bonnie Raitt, but a big hit. And it's good to have, you know, you also, for some people that, and you know this, Ivor, from artists that are kind of, you know, from the street and they've got these, you know, creative albums that don't necessarily have commercial hits on them. And then all of a sudden, the artist has a commercial hit, and at times people go, "Oh yeah, well, you're now you're big deal now. You got a hit record." But at the same time, you also want the best for the artist, and going, "Well, you know, finally, thank God you got a big hit, and you can make some money."
No, absolutely. I mean, that was on her 11th album, right? So I mean, she's toiling on the tour market forever. I must admit, I've never. It's just. Not that there's anything wrong with her music whatsoever, because there isn't. And one of my best friends loved her. Every time I would see him, he talked to me about like, oh, we're going to see Bonnie Raitt or whatever. And and we had so much in common with music except for Bonnie Raitt. It just never, for me, it's something I would never put her records on. I would never be into it, but I certainly respect that. And I remember, when I worked with the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, and they had been around for a long time too, and all of a sudden that record comes out in 1997, and they go into the stratosphere, and they have a huge #1 alternative hit. but they never had another one. And I remember seeing Dickie Barrett a couple of years after. He goes, "Yeah, we're just back to being the Boss Tones now, right?" And so sometimes I think there's a bit of a comfort level with going way up, and then kind of coming back to what I did, because she had a pretty decent touring base, and you always would see Bonnie Raitt playing at the Sheds every summer or coming in to do a Massey Hall or things along those lines. Well respected.
Yeah, and as we talked about before, when you go back to those years of certainly the 60s, 70s, and 80s, that bands were making most of their money from selling records, and into the 90s to a degree, right? And it was not until after Napster in the 2000s where touring became the way to make money as an artist, right?
Absolutely. That was how it all happened, and that was when we talked about this in the previous episode, why part of the reason why you'd see those $7 or $10, and as it got later into the 80s, $20 concert tickets, because it was all about record sales, and those shows were to promote the record, and now it's the other way around.
June 1st, 1991, myself and a buddy, Scott Fraser, put on this night at the Opera House. We were talking about venues that were bought up by Live Nation, right? Opera House is one of those. So, Athena and Steve Towers, you probably know them. I think
Athena runs the Opera House, right?
Yeah, I think she's still running the Opera House. But anyway, Athena and Steve Towers are the part of the family that ran the Opera House. They were, because we came in there, Scott Fraser and I, we'd just come back from England, and everybody was talking about these raves and stuff. And we want to put on a rave. And we had all the music. We had, like you, going, with crates of records and stuff that we brought back from England. And just like you, when you came back to CFNY with all the punk records, Scott Fraser and I had all these rave records and this techno. And it's like, hey, we want to have a rave again. The raves are really big and starting to happen in the UK. And so we talked to Athena and Steve into doing this night at the Opera House. They were very good, and thank you very much. And we put out some flyers, and we really didn't know how to promote properly. And anyway, so we do our first night. We have a flyer called Summer Rave. And this is, before anyone's really heard of raves in Toronto. And the rave scene hasn't even started in Toronto. And we put this flyer out, and then we get all the records. And by the way, I don't know if you know where the DJ booth used to be at the Opera House, because this is an old theater, right?
I don't really. I mean, when I go to the Opera House, I think of concerts. I don't think about DJ booths.
No, and they really didn't have one. So there was basically at the back there was a stair. I don't know, a ladder,
stairwell,
a ladder of some sort that took you up to a catwalk, and then literally it was at a 90-degree angle straight up, and to carry a crate of records up there was backbreaking, just crazy. Anyway, but it's way up in the back. You couldn't even see the DJ booth that they had at the time, and that's kind of where we DJ'd. Anyway, long story short is, so we do on our first night, and I think about 8 kids showed up from England. All these ravers from England, yay! And they're otherwise it was just crickets. There's nobody there. Nobody had heard of what a rave is yet. So we were a little ahead of the scene, but we had fun. We kind of had to kill that at the end of the summer, because it just didn't.
I had
too early.
If I go back to 1980, one of the first gigs I got hired to do outside of before the CFNY Roadshow was. I got hired by the Teenage Head management team to do, because they were based at Larry's Hideaway at the time, and they said, and I think you've even posted it before, punk rock DJ Ivor Hamilton, right?
Yeah.
They gave me money to go out and buy. I went into Fairview Electronics and bought 2 1200s and bought a little mixing board, and then they gave me money to buy a bunch of records, and so I bought a bunch of imports from the peddler, and we started this punk rock night, and they promoted it as inflation prices dancing or whatever, and they ran a bunch of newspaper ads, and I don't think the whole time, I might have been there for about 2 months, I don't think we got more than 20 people the whole time, right? And it's a little bit frustrating when you're trying to start something up and get something going or whatever, but it is
so many bits to it, from the marketing side to just the right place at the right time is so key too, right?
But then for years I DJ'd at Nuts and Bolts, right? Nights off from the roadshow, I was DJing at Nuts and Bolts.
Yeah.
And I also DJ'd at Stars in Brampton, and the Stars in Brampton one was quite successful. I had a good run up there, and Nuts and Bolts was a good run as well. I mean, there were so many people that went to Nuts and Bolts back.
Yeah, I remember you at Nuts and Bolts. That was a good one.
Yeah.
That was good. Anyway, June 7th, 1991, the single Get Off from Prince is released. By the way, when we were talking about which, releases and milestones we were going to talk about, for some reason it was stuck in my head, a different Get Off. I was thinking of I don't know if you remember this band called, was it Foxy? Yeah, Foxy, Get Off. It was like a disco song from like 1978 or something, and it was like this really funky disco track.
Yeah, I think I know.
It was really big in the clubs. Anyway, you'll have to put that on the playlist now, just because I mentioned
the other Foxy. Okay,
the other Foxy. Yeah,
the other Get Off. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, the other Get Off. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we're talking about Prince, and that was this Get Off is credited to the first single of Prince and the New Power Generation, right? So that was kind of a new direction, because they had that film that had come out the year before, Graffiti Bridge, which wasn't, a total stiff, but it also wasn't super successful. So this was kind of just a new direction. It's sort of more embracing of hip hop, and then the sort of the terminology of New Jack Swing, which was very prominent at the time and seems to have gone away at the time. And it ended up being a number one global hit, and a number one Billboard dance song. So,
okay, June 4th, 1991, concert at Kingswood, Poison, Bullet Boys, and Slaughter. I know Poison, I know Slaughter. Never heard of Bullet Boys. Who was Bullet Boys?
Well, I got one word for the whole event: garbage.
Hairspray.
Hair bands. When I was at Polygram, we had a lovely assistant who helped us at our department at Polygram. Her name was Laura Ferguson, and we're still pals today. And the one thing I could never get through to Laura was, the grunge was hitting, and I'd come from CFNY, and a bunch of other people on the team at Polygram were all like big alternative music things. Laura lived and died on hair metal bands, right? And that was to her one of the biggest events of the year, to go and see these three bands. And I remember her talking about the Bullet Boys. I'm like, who the fuck are the Bullet Boys, right?
Yeah.
And I know.
And who are they?
I mean, I still don't know who the Bullet Boys are.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, I don't care. But I did a little bit of research and going, are any of these bands still around today? And surprisingly, the original lineup of the Bullet Boys reformed recently. They're out still touring.
Wow.
And they're out playing with other awful bands like Warrant and Firehouse, which were also terrible bands of the era, in my opinion. The band Slaughter is still out there with two of their original bands. And you don't see this so much in Canada, but if you sort of holiday in the US and sort of follow these secondary markets, there's always some little festival going on that has these types of bands on it. The classic rock radio never died. Now, Poison were supposed to do a big 40th anniversary tour in 2026. It fell apart because of an internal financial dispute. Wow. Shockingly, Bret Michaels, he wanted 6-1 over everybody else in the band financially. So for every $6 that the band took in, he would take 6, and the band would get 1. The rest of the band said "F you." And I think of other bands like the Tragically Hip, who everybody got an equal share of everything, and Bret Michaels wanting 6 times what everybody else did. So Poison, F you.
Yeah. If you ever want a guide to how to implode a band up, try that sort of share of wealth.
Come on, when 40 years onwards, I mean, come on. Everybody's trying to make a living. Everybody's, trying to live on the nostalgia thing, and you kind of got that attitude. It's just there's a handful of those egotistical guys out there, and unfortunately, Bret Michaels is one of them. So.
Hey, well, Ivor and I are both music snobs, and we what we think of hair metal bands and all that. But I got to tell you, they are the people that are into that are super core hardcore into that stuff. And I learned from
they're
markets
good
like
people.
working in Kitchener, there's a lot of hair metal, or hair band fans, and I love that stuff.
Speaking of Kitchener, one of the best in-stores that I ever did was in Kitchener when we had Cinderella playing up there, and
It was packed, right?
it was rammed. People went nuts. So.
Yes. See? Yeah. I know there's certain markets that it's just, it is. Nothing you
and
can do about it. Yeah.
I laugh every time I hear the song Gypsy Road. And Tom Kiefer, I didn't like the music, but I like the guys in the band. The guys in the band were all very fun and good people to work with. And that's what I found with most of the hair metal bands. It wasn't my cup of tea, that's for sure. But I just, shut up and get out there and work the records. And you did what you had to do, right?
We don't care about you, Ivor. We're selling records here.
They didn't. Yeah, I sold the
All
records.
right.
I mean, I used to have John Bon Jovi. He would corner you and go, Ivor Hamilton, what are you doing to sell my records? And you'd be like, and he'd do that with a lot of people, right?
I love it.
Yeah.
Good for him.
Yeah.
Good for him. Okay, birthdays. Well, you know who would have been 85 on June 2nd? Charlie Watts of the Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Charlie's on the new record. They saved there's some tracks that were recorded,
Seriously?
never made. Yeah. And
Seriously?
yeah,
Oh, wow.
there are some Charlie Watts beats on the Foreign Tongues record that's coming out in July. So the spirit of Charlie lives on. And I met him twice, including the last time the Stones were in Canada when they played up at the Oro Medonte, the site where the Boots and Hearts is up there, and just a lovely, lovely gentleman.
Yeah. One of my favorite things about Charlie is seeing the Stones live. And also, if you haven't seen them live or you looked at some YouTube videos, just the look on his face sometimes. He just had this smirk on his face, because Mick was doing whatever Mick was doing and Keith doing, and he'd just be playing his solid beat every time.
Well, it was just kind of like the little bit of this, right?
Yeah,
a little bit of Charlie doing
this. But he
this.
had this little grin on his face, either whatever, guys,
and then I saw a parody or some sort of comedy parody, and it's like, here's Charlie Watts doing his little thing, and here's Neil Peart, 86 cymbals and fucking gongs, and it's like,
that's
wow.
So for those of you not on YouTube, it's like he's almost tied, tied at the wrists the way he drums. There's a very close. His wrists were really close together, and he wasn't all over the place. Yes, that's so true. So another birthday would have Frankie Kerr, also known as Frankie Venom of Teenage Head, would have been 70 years old on June 2nd. How about that, eh?
The band that I've seen most is Teenage Head, and you and I went and saw them the last time I saw them, and of course those guys, all of the remaining members and the current members of the band, all came to the documentary in when we were there in Hamilton not too long ago. So we still have a great relationship, and if we weren't doing our show this Saturday at the Cyril Clark Theater, they're playing at the Horseshoe on the same night. But you should still come and see our show, because you'll be able to get to see Teenage Head another time, but not our last documentary screening. But I loved Frankie. I mean, he was, in those early days, he was like one of the best punk showmen you could ask for. I mean, I remember
those classic shots of him jumping up in the air. There's some
the shots of him hanging up the air, but I remember going up to see them at the Key to Bala, and this would have been about 1980 sometime, and those rafters at the Key to Bala, and he climbed right up those rafters and was hanging upside down from his feet and stuff like that. I mean, it was absolutely wild, totally wild. What those shows were back in the day. Always great shows, and
died too soon. He was just 51. He died 2008.
He was, he had his issues or whatever. I mean, the other thing that it was kind of hit me in the heart is when we did the 2019 when we had the Teenage Heads record, which became Teenage Head, and we did a reissue of it, and I got the band to play the Labor Day Classic out at formerly Ivor Wynne or Tim Horton Stadium, which now is just Tim Stadium, whatever. But it was in front of 25,000 people. They ended up filming it and put it in their documentary. A little side note on that, Doug McClement tells me, he goes, Ivor, if you had told me that you were doing that thing at the Ticats game, he goes, I would have come and done the audio for free. So as a consequence on that day, we didn't get into the broadcast because we didn't have a broadcast truck for Teenage Head, whatever. But we did a deal with the Tiger Cats, and there's a T-shirt, and I wear it in the documentary, even though I was yelled at for continuity. I didn't care. Of the Tiger Cats logo with Teenage Head, and it was one of the team's best-selling T-shirts. In 2026, the band have brought it back, which is amazing. But they did tell me that they took one and put it on Frankie's grave because he would have loved it had he been around.
Oh, that is so cool. That's a great story, Ivor. And also, this one makes me feel old for some reason. Richard Bueller of Psychedelic Furs turning 70. Like, jeez.
Well, listen, Nick Hayward just turned 65, and I'm like, I remember you guys when God, you're only a year younger than me. I remember you were a bunch of young kids when you came out to the radio station. That's how much time has gone by, right? So
I know we think about many of those bands we played on CFNY, those artists that we were the same age of them. You'll see them live and then you realize, and you look at them now and you go, oh, well, they've aged, and it's like, yeah, well, so have we.
Well, yeah, what makes us special?
Exactly.
Once in a while, I get a friend of mine who goes, have you looked in the mirror lately? And I'm like, right, I'll shut up from here on in, right? Or because you think to yourself with your friends, oh yeah, we look great or whatever, we're fine, whatever, and then you see a picture of yourself, not so much.
Yeah, especially when you go, 1986 was 40 years ago,
right?
Like, huh? When did that happen? All right,
exactly, and so the Psychedelic Furs are like a flock of seagulls with Ed Sousa in Buffalo. They make regular appearances in Buffalo. So that show in Buffalo is still on. I saw them last summer with the Chameleons. This year, it's with the Violent Femmes. It's not with the other lineup that's going out on tour. I think it's Living Color. But so Violent Femmes and Psych Furs, August 14th, Outer Harbor, Buffalo.
Okay, thanks for that update. And because I know a couple of dates were postponed, but that one's still on. Good. Okay. Also, just this past week, we lost some people. Rob Bass, just at age 59, of Rob Bass and DJ Easy Rock, of course. It Takes Two. Everybody remembers that one. Not sure.
Joy and Pain, right?
Yeah, Joy and Pain. That was a great one. Yes, yes.
Yeah, and, I mean, when I left CFNY, and one of the first dance records that I worked on was It Takes Two. And Polygram in Canada had Profile Records, so it was a little different in the States. It was an independent label, so we had Profile. And Rob Bass and DJ Easy Rock, they came to Canada quite regularly. They did a lot of club shows, a lot of concerts. Yep. It was one of the first times I remember they pulled their tour bus in front of our little office up in Duncan Mill Road in North York, came to visit us, and I just also remember having a great relationship with them, and especially all of the Toronto area DJs, because I used to work the cheer pool and the dance pools, and Rob Bass was just unstoppable at that time in the clubs.
It was a good time. I just got a poster up beside me in my office here that we did at Energy 108, one of our summer festivals. Energy Fest 96 had Rob Bass and DJ Easy Rock. That was in August of 96.
And for some reason, Scott, when I moved down to Niagara-on-the-Lake, I said one of the first awards I ever got when I went to Polygram was for the Rob Bass record. Do you think I can find it? It's somewhere in a box buried in the back room. So hopefully, if I can find that, we'll post a picture of it. But I'll always be grateful for that, and for dance music and hip hop, that Rob Bass had a lot of respect for Canada and did a lot of work in this market, which it used to be a struggle as a Canadian record company at the time. A lot of times to get bands to come up here. A lot of times they didn't get it, or you'd find out they didn't have a passport, or they didn't have any ID, and they'd never been outside of their the area that they normally played in. But Rob Bass was one that came here right from the get-go.
Sonny Rollins, 95 years old, good life, saxophonist, huge name in the industry.
It had a reputation as one of the, greatest improvisers and the most influential tenor sax players of all time. So, had a 7-decade career. He'd stopped performing, I think, probably in the 2010s or whatever, but lived out the rest of his years quite quietly. But absolute colossus in the world of jazz, a big loss.
Legend. And another sax player we lost this past week, Dick Perry, at age 83. If you don't know that name, you probably know a certain song called Money by Pink Floyd and Shine On You Crazy Diamond. You remember those sax solos? That's the guy.
Yeah, he also toured with The Who once Keith Moon had passed away. He played on John Entwistle's solo album in 1975. Pleasantly, I just learned this because and I'll put it on the playlist, that he played on Rory Gallagher's Jinx record, song called Big Guns. And another one that really surprised me is later in his life, he toured with the Violent Femmes. And I'm like, oh, that's really, did not know that. But anyway.
Wow. Yeah, I did not know that either. Okay, let's do the 80s.
All right.
Okay, we're looking at the week of June 1st to 7th, so Milestones. We talked about 1986 being 40 years ago. The track Tears from the Chameleons was released. Great track. Love this track. Just a beautiful record.
That's from the Strange Times record. That was they got signed to Geffen at that point. They'd been sort of toiling on Static Records before that as an independent. And finally they kind of got, their big American record contract. Interesting about Tears that there are two versions. So if you're on the original version of that record, it's kind of an acoustic based track. And as time went on, typical of the American record label, we need to have something that's more friendly for radio. So they did a full electric version. So in 2026, what you get if you go onto the streaming services to listen to that album, you get to hear both versions at the same time. One of their great albums. I regret that CFNY did not embrace the Chameleons as much as they should have. We did play their records, all of them, but we never played them that much. Outside of Swamp, if you talk to most CFNY listeners, go, well, I know Swamp Thing. They don't know anything else. They had so much more to offer as far as I'm concerned. And I shouldn't say, and I shouldn't generalize that they don't know anything else, but 9 out of 10 people would just say they remember for Swamp Thing, but so much more to these guys.
Yeah.
And still out there playing today. So
go back and listen to more, including Tears. Yeah. It'll be on our playlist. So look for that.
Absolutely.
Okay. So 40 years ago this week, this certain film called Ferris Bueller's Day Off is released. And what a classic film. Let's just, before we start talking about that great film, here's a little clip from the movie you might remember.
Ferris?
Tom? What's the matter?
Oh, it's Ferris.
What? What's wrong?
What's wrong? For Christ's sake, look at him, honey.
Ferris?
He doesn't have a fever, but he says his stomach hurts and he's seeing spots.
What's the matter, Ferris?
Papa?
Honey, feel his hands. They're cold and clammy.
I'm fine. I get up.
No.
I have a test today.
No.
I have to take it. I want to go to a good college so I can have a fruitful life.
Honey, you're not going to school like this now.
Oh, fine. What's this? What's his problem?
He doesn't feel well.
Yeah, right. Dry that one out. You can fertilize the lawn.
Jeannie? Is that you? Jeannie? I can't see that far. Jeannie? Jeannie,
Bite the big one, Junior.
Thank you, Jeannie. You get to school.
Wait, you're letting him stay home? I can't believe this. If I was bleeding out my eyes, you guys would make me go to school. This is so unfair.
Do you remember what excuses did you have or give to get off school. Do you know, I would just tell my mother. My mother was great because there were certain days I'm like, oh, Ma, I just don't feel like going to school today. And she would write me a note. Like, I didn't abuse it, but my mom was super cool about that.
So here's two scenarios for you. First of all, I never got away with jack shit because my mother taught at the same school.
That's right. Your
Right.
mother was
So
a teacher. Right.
I got away with zero. But I had one of my best friends. His name was Dave Christie, and today his son is a Juno Award-winning comedian, Adam Christie. And I don't know if you've heard Adam Christie stuff. It is phenomenal.
No,
but most of it's off the old man Dave. So Dave's mother is Russian. And so what Dave wanted the day off school, he'd get his mom and go, Dave, you were away. I need to get a note from you, right? And so he'd get his mom to write a note. He goes, Mom, can you do it in Russian? So she'd write it in Russian. He'd walk in and hand it to this teacher, and he'd go, what the hell is this? So he goes, you asked for a note, you got it, right? So
well, having a mother as a teacher, Ivor, no chance.
I remember there was a student walkout or something at the school. I don't know what we were protesting on. And there's my mother out there seeing me doing that. I mean, she practically grabbed me by the ear and marched me right off out of the protest, right? So
here's the very quickly, here's the famous attendance check in class.
Adams.
Here.
Adamley.
Here.
Adamowski. Adamson.
Here.
Adler.
Here.
Anderson. Anderson.
Here.
Bueller. 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 Bueller.
He's sick. My best friend's sister's boyfriend's brother's girlfriend heard from this guy who knows this kid is going with the girl who saw Ferris pass out at 31 Flavors last night. I guess it's pretty serious.
Thank you, Simone.
No problem whatsoever.
I mean, I had a guy that I went to school with, to the same school, and I don't know if you were a fan of Leave It to Beaver, but one of the characters on Leave It to Beaver was Eddie Haskell.
Yes.
Who was the polite guy who was really a two-faced son of a bitch, right?
Yes.
And so he's always lying. And so this guy, I remember, was grade 9 science, and he was the sort of guy who goes, Sir, I think that tie you're wearing today is most excellent. I think it's really great. And so he'd always be like, essentially feeding the teacher a line of shit. And I remember the first week back at school, for the first week, another guy was away from school. One of our friends wasn't there. And finally, after the second week, he goes, has anybody seen John McCrindle? And without hesitation, Dave put his hand up. He goes, Sir, he's bear hunting in Alaska. And I'm like, where in the world would somebody come up with something stupid like that with the straightest look on his face?
Oh, man.
Anyway.
It's such a classic film, so many great scenes, and of course the music. And you know that even though CFNY was first to play Yellow and the huge track, now I've forgotten it. Oh yeah, by Yellow, of course.
Yeah.
Which had been out like a year earlier, I think. And this film, made that song.
Perpetuated it for sure. It was funny. I was, looking into this. You go think about John Hughes films and Breakfast Club and Pretty in Pink, and going, I want to look up the soundtrack for Ferris Bueller's. And it was like, well, there actually wasn't one until decades later. And John Hughes was quoted as saying, he goes, he blocked a soundtrack being made because he goes, I don't think kids would be into a soundtrack that had Donkashane by Wayne Newton with Yellow back to back. And I'm like, he's not wrong, right?
Oh, jeez. Great memory. Great memory.
Yeah.
Okay. Also out the same week, unless you have any other.
No, we're good.
Okay. Yeah. Also out the same week, Invisible Touch from Genesis that ended up on the year-end list, CFNY year-end list at number 22. And this is a good time to remind everybody that CFNY did base most of those year-end lists on listener votes. Because I was at the station at the time, 1986. I don't ever remember playing that album. Of course, we had a choice to play it or not, and I chose not.
No, and I don't recall hearing much of that. I mean, quite honestly, CFNY, the two solo records that came out post Peter Gabriel are pretty much where our support of Genesis realistically ended, right? Maybe that, and then there were three. We played that single that came out and was never on any album, Match of the Day. It was a lot of fun, that one. But the Invisible Touch and that. But, as I recall, we sort of had a lot of people hung on from the early days of CFNY, continue to, call in and like those type of bands and like some of the early prog bands. And those listeners were a lot of fans that followed David over and David Pritchard before David Marsden from Chum FM. So, those bands, they were cooler in the 70s. And as we got into the 80s, not so much cool anymore. So the Invisible Touch, and I'm like going, yes. And those were all executed by listeners. And some of those listeners, I'm sure, were listening to Chum and maybe listening to Q, and they phoned in or would not phone in, but write in their top 3 albums. And there was always an incentive. We always gave away that entire library of every album that was in that top of 86 or whatever it was, because it went up one every year. And there was usually a pretty good stereo that went with it too. So, I'll vote for whatever. So you probably got a few people who voted for that. The fun thing about Invisible Touch and also Peter Gabriel was it's the only time in the history of Gabriel and this Genesis record is that Sledgehammer knocked off Invisible Touch out of the #1 slot in America on the top 40, because it was two of the biggest records at the time.
And that was the first time for Gabriel. Yeah.
A little quote this morning from it said that it was an interview with Phil Collins, and it was in The Guardian. And Collins joked about it. He goes, I'd read that Peter Gabriel knocked us out of the #1 spot with Sledgehammer. We weren't even aware of that at the time. If we had been, we'd probably have sent him a telegram saying, congratulations, you bastard.
That's good spirit. Hey, and you know what? Genesis is a good example of, and we had many of these at CFNY, polarizing bands, artists that had been around for a while, but they changed their sound. And we had some people were on the side of, well, I'm still a fan of the band and we should play them. And other people going, this new stuff, this new sound, there's terrible, we shouldn't be playing them. And we had lots and lots of healthy arguments over that, right?
And some of the bands changed, and they were good changes. And other ones who tried to do it and was like, quite frankly, it didn't work. And it just came a time that's like, hey, I know you're trying to modernize, but we're still not going to play your records. And they became uncool. Once again, I will state my big regret that we should have never stopped playing Rush records, because that was a big mistake. Sorry, Catherine Wheel. But that's just me trying to change the Wayback Machine. Anyway.
That's true. Those are tough, right? It's so easy to look back 40 years later. And
should have done that.
You should have done it like that. Yes, of course, of course.
I would have been, and I would have been more vocal about Baltimore, for fuck's sakes. Fuck, are you guys out of your minds on that? Anyway,
there were some others too. It's all good. Okay. Yeah. Also, single Kundalini Express from Love and Rockets. This is the first single from the album Express. That fantastic album that would be out that September. Great track, great album.
I love the sort of the railway sound in that, sort of whole express train coming down the track, and it kind of vaulted them out of like just being like goth into a little more of a rock band more than anything.
So 40 years ago, June 6, 1986, a major event happened in Canadian radio. Chum AM gives up their top 40 playlist, their top 40 format, and switches to a format they called Favorites of Yesterday and Today. So basically the end of top 40 for Chum AM. And Ira and I were talking about this. So we all grew up on Chum in the late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah, I mean, that's for me. When I arrived in Toronto in 1969, because we'd originally come out from BC, and that was the go-to. That's what you listen to, right? you want to hear all the latest music. I did listen to a little bit to CKOC at the time because they played a couple of different things, but those were the two stations you listened to at the time.
Before I discovered Chum FM.
Well, then you discovered Chum FM about 6 months later, and I never looked back. But you know, when you're 10 years old at the time, that was what you listened to, and it was
and Chum AM
was a powerhouse.
Yeah, Chum AM was great. And here's look at I look at this, Ivor. So for those on
YouTube,
I still have my old Chum chart. So this is literally I had this in a pile like this, and I just grabbed. Here's the very first one. This is
who's on the cover of that one that you just had.
So this is Jim Van Horn. Okay, this is the Chum. And here's the cool thing. And Ivor and I were talking about this: how diverse the music and you know, from the cheesiest track to the coolest track, it was all played by Chum back in those days. So this is the chart of November 3rd, 1973. Listen to this. So you got Angie by the Stones at number 1, Half Breed by Cher, Delta Dawn, Helen Reddy, obviously cheesy. Then you got Photograph, Ringo Starr, Just You and Me, Chicago. Then Ramblin' Man, Allman Brothers, Higher Ground, Stevie Wonder, Free Ride from Edgar Winter, We're American Band from Grand Funk, China Grove from Doobie Brothers. Like it's amazing.
All
and
FM
I could go
songs,
on and on.
With the exception of Cher, they were all sort of FM rock songs too.
Yeah, and then, you know, later on you'd have like a Carpenter's track and a Dawn track, but then there's a Bob Dylan, and then there's a John Lennon, and then there's a Jim Croce, and it just goes on and on. Anyway, the variety really of styles back then was pretty impressive.
It was, and they had their album chart at the bottom, and that was always worth checking out if you were, you know, I think if you were a Chum FM fan at the time, and you're kind of like, oh, you know what, they've got an album chart here, and that to me was it was kind of a good tool as a young record buyer to go, you know, that's on the Chum album chart. I bet it's pretty good.
Here's a little audio from way back.
Mrs. Chappell, I'm sorry, your time is up. Next hour, another chance to crack the combination and win $1,000 from Chum Supremes.
Supremes! That's how you announced an AM radio back then. Supremes! Anyway, that was, I think that was Terry Steele. That audio.
No woman on the radio station, though, right?
Yeah.
All dudes. And now the ladies are taking over, right? With Josie Dye and her sidekick that are taking over on the Chum FM morning show.
Yeah, and good for them. And also just a plug to listen to the Liz Janik interview. Speaking of women and trailblazers in the media industry, Liz Janik interview. Check it out. The Music Milestones interview with Liz. It's out now. So here's a great track. This always reminds me of CFNY before I started working there. In this week in 1981, Screaming Jets, Johnny Warman, got played a lot. And I just, you know, when I think of CFNY, that's one of those songs I go, yep, that's a CFNY track.
Absolutely was. You know, and I didn't even think about this until we put it on the agenda for today to go a little bit deeper on the, you know, the whole, you know, who else was in that band or what was that all about? And so I guess it was his second record, and he was in a couple of punk bands before doing his Johnny Warman solo thing, but he got signed to Elton John's label, and Elton John adored him. He was signed to Rocket Records, and Elton John called him something like the best singing jukebox you're going to want to know about. I'm like, okay. And apparently the song itself was written immediately after he had just watched Apocalypse Now. And the other thing that I did not know, do you know who the backing band is on this record? And I had no idea.
I do not remember. If I ever did, I've forgotten.
Peter Gabriel's band were his backing band on this record. So you got Tony Levin, Jerry Marotta, and Larry Fast all on this record. So they were in the studio in New Jersey, and they were tracking all of the things that they were recording. And he had just written this Screaming Jets song, and Gabriel just happened to be in town, decided, you know what, the guys are all over in the studio, I'm just going to drop in and see what's going on. And so he drops in and he goes, yeah, we're working on this song. And Gabriel goes, well, maybe I can just help with some of the vocal arrangements or something. And so they go in, and it was totally unintentional. And then Gabriel, of course, plays his part on that. The other thing I didn't know about
Fantastic.
that the song was a massive, massive hit in Australia, bigger in Australia than anywhere else. So I did not know that either.
No, that's cool. I did not know that either. Speaking of Australia, so 45 years ago this week, Who Can It Be Now by Men at Work is released in Australia before it gets released anywhere else. So, and Ivor, we were talking about the connection that the station had with Australia, and some of these Australian records that you got to hear on CFNY on import.
It was really, one of the greatest announcers ever on CFNY, who wasn't featured in the documentary because he had since passed, was Brad McNally. He was there during the very early days. Just an absolutely wicked sense of humor, but an incredible radio announcer, and went on to be a huge programmer. But he was Canadian and Australian, and he had spent time in Australia, and because they'd been in Canada, and his dad was in the construction business, and they spent their first couple of winters in Canada. And said, "Oh my God, the hell with this! We're going to Australia." so anyway, but then Brad had his roots in Canada and Oakville, had all his friends and things like that. So he comes back and he's on CFNY, but then he decided to go back to Australia. Anyway, he's down in Australia. He's running, being a program director at a couple of big radio stations down there. I started getting packages from him, right? And he called everybody Dick, but he called me Dick in particular, right? So I get a package addressed to Dick Hamilton at CFNY, and I open it up, whole bunch of records from Australia. And of course, we've talked about on the radio about CFNY before, is that our hits were designated with a purple dot and a double purple dot. So he had all these new records, and one of them was Men Without Work, and he stuck a purple dot on this song. And I was like, okay, if Brad says it's good, I'm going to listen to it. And that was how we played Men at Work first before anybody else. It was thanks to Brad McNally.
Yeah, fantastic. Great memory. So back 45 years ago this week, it was June 6, 1981 is the date that the Edge, the last performance at the Edge, once called Edgerton's back in the early days and then became the Edge. And of course, is a legendary club in Toronto concert history for so many bands that played first at the Edge. And you were at the last show, right, Ivor?
I was at the last show. And, I've never had some clarity. We'll have to speak to Gary or Gary Top or Cormier or both of them again. I mean, I can really kind of only ascertain, and maybe it's in his book or whatever, that, financial constraints probably had them, move on, or maybe the landlord or the landlord wanting to do other things with the club, but it never held more than 200 people. And it was, the sight lines in the place were not very good either. So it
terrible.
It was not a great place to
it's
see
a small house, really.
It was in a friggin' house, right? Yeah. So
which is still there today, right?
It is, but
Church in Gerrard.
Can you imagine having 200 people play in my basement? Like, not really. Yeah. So that's what it became. The last show was Kevin Coyne, and Kevin Coyne, a pretty eccentric British folk rock artist, maybe a little more electrified on the Dylan side, but very eccentric. And when the Garys were given the opportunity to book the Police the first time, they had never heard of the Police. They had no idea who the Police were when they were asked by Miles Copeland to say, "You need to book our new little band from England." And so then they're looking at the lineup and going, "There's Andy Summers playing in that band." He goes, "Wasn't he in Kevin Coyne's band?" And he's like, "If he was in, yeah, that's the same guy." And he goes, "We're booking him." So they booked the Police because of Kevin Coyne. The second they got off the plane to do that very first show that they ever did in Toronto down at the Horseshoe, the first question was, "How do we get a hold of Kevin Coyne?" So they were much more interested in Kevin Coyne than they were in the Police. Of course, that became an entirely different story. But I remember Kevin playing in the corner. I'm pretty sure it was just him. I don't think it was a full electric band show. Right. But yeah, I mean, certainly sad to see the Edge go. It would have been nice of it to have been around for longer, and certainly it was super unfortunate when we lost Ian Curtis. That Joy Division were scheduled to play there in May of 1982, 1980, I'm going to say.
Yeah.
And yeah, we'll always miss that club. It's absolutely legendary. And the name of the club, people, has nothing to do with the Edge radio station as it is today.
Yeah, that
It's
does
just a
happen
coincidence.
sometimes when
It's a coincidence, and things
when
happen.
we do a post and saying so and so played at the Edge. Every now and then somebody goes, "Oh, wow, that's cool! Played at the radio station." And it was like, "Oh, no, it's a club. You have to be of a certain age to remember that."
Yeah.
And we talked about this, Ivor. Is we're going to do a deeper dive into the Edge because there's much more of a story. And Ivor, you just touched on a couple of parts of it. And I think, from whether we have the Garys on or Gary Top on as an interview, but we'll talk more about some of the classic memories of the Edge over the years.
Absolutely.
Another time when we have more time, because we're running out of time. So just to finish up the 80s, Talk, 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 the second album from I think it was the second album from
Second album.
First. Yeah, that was ended up as the third album of the year on the CFNY year-end list. A great record from beginning to end. Played it a lot. Love it.
Yeah. I'd say outside of Pretty in Pink, Into You Like a Train and Dumb Waiters were two of the other big songs on that album. And it was produced by Steve Lillywhite too. So
yeah, and also just as these things, as we update our research on some of these dates, album release dates move around. I found another date saying it was May 15th that the album was released. But anyways, sometimes international dates are different all over the place, as you know.
Absolutely.
So let's do the 70s just to wrap up here. Just a couple more to mention, and then we will move on. So funny with the Edge. I just remember sitting on windowsills and various corners of the Edge to try to get a sight view of the stage, which was in another room. And
there were so many bands that I would realistically today say I didn't see because I couldn't see the goddamn stage, right? Like they were just like, there's some bands played on the other side of the staircase or whatever, or I would be during the summer, I'd be standing outside on the patio because you couldn't see.
I know. Anyway, so 50 years ago this week, Shake Some Action from the Flamin' Groovies album is released, and great song. I can't remember the rest of the album, but that song I remember.
I know the album inside and out. I played it a million times end to end. It was kind of, the album came along at the right time. They were in the right place at the right time. They'd been around since the early 70s, and their album called Teenage Head was the inspiration for some band from Hamilton that we just talked about on the program earlier. But to me, it just was kind of like that. It was produced by Dave Edmunds, and it was the sort of blend between punk and power pop that was just starting to emerge at the same time as the punk rock movement. I just think it's probably, to me, one of the greatest albums of the 70s and one of the greatest albums of the era.
I remember hearing, Shake Some Action on CFNY, and I thought, this is some new wave, new band, and it because they had a very much of a new wave sound. I know you use the term power pop, and they kind of interchange sometimes those kind of sounds. But it's kind of, when you think about it, and a lot of people will say that new wave sounds, some punk sounds were kind of the next derivative of garage rock, which came out of the 60s and 70s, right?
Yeah, and Dave Edmunds had sort of come out of the sort of pub rock scene, and the band dressed in these kind of like 60s suits on there. I mean, you look at the cover of that record, and there's a Jaguar with a British plate on it. You go, these guys, I had no idea they were from San Francisco. I thought they were a UK band. I had no idea until I really sort of dug into it.
Yeah, I probably thought that when I first heard that record too. Also, 50 years ago, 50th anniversary of the Summertime Dream album from Gordon Lightfoot. This is the one that had the record of the Edmund Fitzgerald on it.
Yes, I would say, it's a landmark Canadian record, and won multiple Juno awards, and probably every time you'd see Gordon, you couldn't get away without having that song played.
Yeah, and I know somebody should do an updated. I know there's been some, greatest Canadian records of all time, You know, if you ever to do it again, I wonder where that would be now. You know, now that it's 50 years later, where Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald would be. Anyway, we got to wrap it up.
Still be there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, where would that be now, right? But still a classic song. So just to wrap up this week, we got some concerts, a busy week. Just we'll mention a few very quickly. June 1st, the Guess Who are at the TD Coliseum, Hamilton. We got, I'll let you read through the others, Ivor, because there's a book launch that you should plug here.
Yes, Amyl and the Sniffers at RBC. That's one of my favorite records over the last couple of years. This coming Thursday, I will be at Harmony Hall. Grant Ivins, who's from the Slime Dogs and who just done all of the artwork for us on all of the CFNY documentary tour road shows. He's got a book called Why Not? It's just about, it's a business book, but I'm going to DJ. Alan's going to be there. And we have merchandise on sale at that one too. So you look forward to that one. Sky Diggers are playing on the 5th in town. Our documentary, of course, in Brampton at Cyril Clark next Saturday night on the 6th. Teenage Head, same night at the Horseshoe. Devo at the AKG Art Museum in Buffalo on the 6th as well. Again, and 6th and 7th, I'm going to be at this one on the 7th, the All Things Go Festival, featuring Kesha, Beaches, and Lord. But the one that I'm going to see on the 7th is Wet Leg. They're going to blow everybody off the stage. That is my opinion on that, and I'm sticking.
Oh, yeah. Wet Leg. There you go. This will be your first chance.
My first chance to see, Rhiann Teasdale and Hester Chambers and their band. I can't wait. It's my most anticipated show until Rush this summer.
Yeah, I hope they give them a decent set list this time. Yeah, it's going to be tough, right? So there's like 4 acts.
Yeah. I think they'll be fine. They're big enough around the world. They'll get a decent set.
Okay, that's cool. Awesome, Ivor. Thank you again, and we'll see everybody at the final theater screening of the extended mix of the CFNY doc in Brampton. There's still some tickets available. They are selling fast, so make sure you don't miss out, and we will see you there, and we'll have merch there. If not, we'll catch you on another episode of this program. Thank you.